Welcome in. It's time to take a deep dive into what the Dolphins have going on with their roster. I'm your host, Jake Riepma, and as the Miami Dolphins get set to take on the Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday in Week 11 of the National Football League, Miami is always looking to improve that roster. Am I right? Especially where the Dolphins are now, Week 11. The bye week is in the rearview mirror, and it is time to look ahead. So, with that said, Miami went ahead and worked out 6 potential free agent signings, and we're going to give you everything you need to know about who those players were that they worked out and whether or not there's a legitimate chance that Miami could make a roster transaction in the form of bringing in some reinforcements for some certain position groups that have been bit by the injury bug. And you know by now that starts with the offensive line. Great to see Teron Armstead back. Rob Jones, Rob Hunt, both of them working on some injuries. Connor Williams played against the Chiefs, but of course he's been banged up this season. And Isaiah Wynn remains on injured reserve as eligible to come back in Week 13. So, with that said, the Dolphins went ahead and worked out 3 different offensive linemen as potential replacements. Not even replacements, but reinforcements. We'll use that word. Reinforcements for some potential depth. Starting with Andrew Norwell. Now, Andrew Norwell is a guy that actually has a decent resume when it comes to his time in the National Football League. Played at Ohio State. He was undrafted, but when you think about what he's been able to accomplish, his resume is, in my opinion, the more impressive one of the 3 different offensive linemen that the Dolphins worked out this week. So, 9-year NFL veteran, has played for 9 years since being an undrafted free agent in 2014. 4 of those seasons were for the Panthers, where he was an All-Pro in 2017. And this is kind of crazy. He was the highest paid guard at one point when he signed with Jacksonville in 2018. Now, I know what you might be thinking. That was a long time ago. And indeed, I agree. It was a long time ago in 2018. But when you look at the 3 different offensive linemen that the Dolphins worked out as potential, probably practice squad guys, Norwell has a lot he's bringing to the table as far as past experience. Now, potential option number 2, if you will, Colby Gossett. Now, Colby Gossett is a guy that also has some NFL experience and has spent some time on a couple of different rosters, but kind of bounced around quite a bit. He played at Appalachian State, and in 2022, he played in 8 games. That's his most recent game time that he was able to register. So he hasn't been active yet in 2023. Really only has 5 career starts, 19 appearances, and I think this is the type of guy you could classify as a journeyman. 6 teams, 6 different years, you get the point. And with that said, I don't necessarily think Gossett's the guy. I mean, again, if this is a practice squad signing, makes a little bit more sense, but I'm not really sure this is the guy that you want to be lining up and representing your offensive line if you're the Aqua and Orange. But he worked out for the Dolphins and is part of the conversation as far as potential signees. Third one, Wes Martin. That was the 3rd offensive lineman that the Dolphins worked out this week as a potential free agent signing, because we know where this is all coming from. The Dolphins offensive line has been beat up with injuries all throughout the season. Now, Martin drafted out of Indiana and was a 4th-round selection by the Washington Commanders, and he also has bounced around quite a bit, kind of a journeyman as well. Washington, Jacksonville, the Giants, and the Browns. A little bit more game experience with the 11 starts in 5 years, 38 appearances overall. But again, not the type of guy that even if you were to make a signing that would jump off the page for you as well. Now, there's a lot of different ways to evaluate the play of offensive linemen, and I don't think there's one set way, because it's not like it's a quarterback that has the stats. You could look at that And, you turn on the tape and you find a way to evaluate offensive linemen. But one particular source I like to use, the Pro Football Focus grades. I've said it before on the show. It's not necessarily the end-all, be-all, but it gives you a little bit of a benchmark, if you will, for what these guys have been able to perform and how they've been able to perform on the field. And overall, this is from 2022, some Pro Football Focus grades for Norwell, right around that 60 at 59.8. Gossett, a little bit lower in 2022 with 55.3. And this is an overall grade, whereas Wes Martin a little bit lower at 40.3. And that's from all the way back in 2021, where he last saw game action. So if you had to pick one to sign, you got to let me know in the comments who you would pick. You got to pick one. Type AN for Andrew Norwell, CG for Colby Gossett, and Wes Martin for WM. Let me know right now in the comments. And I hope I didn't influence anyone too much, but as you look at the resume of these guys, to me it's pretty clear. Norwell is the guy that has the most decorated resume, and I know it's going back to 2018, but at that time, Jacksonville felt like he was a guy to invest heavily in, made him the highest paid guard in the league. And that's ancient history as far as offensive linemen's, their career lives are concerned. But it's still being said, if he's a guy that can add a little bit of depth to your offensive line in a time of need with all the injuries, that's the one for me of the three that the Dolphins had worked out. Now, coming up, we'll talk a little bit more about the other three players that the Dolphins worked out this week and a different position group, different than the offensive line. But first, I want to tell you about PrizePicks, as they're today's proud presenting sponsor. And I love PrizePicks. You will too, because it's the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. That's right, daily fantasy sports. What's that, Jake? I've got a fantasy team, and they suck. Well, good. You're in luck, because daily fantasy sports is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. You simply pick more or less on a player's statistical category, and that's when the fun begins. I do it every Sunday for Dolphins games. I do it for Thursday night football, and heck, you can do it for hoops as well now that the hoop season has started. So check out what I'm working with this week. And I almost always pick more because life, quite frankly, is too short to pick less. That's why you pick more. So I'm going with more on the passing yards for Tua Tagovailoa and more on the projected touchdown total for Tyreek Hill. And that's how easy it is. We picked more. Now we sit back and enjoy the show. So go to prizepicks.com/CLNS. That's where we've got a $100 deposit match waiting for you for being a Dolphins fan. So if you want a $100 deposit match, you're doubling your money. We've got you covered. PrizePicks.com/CLNS, and we'll put the link of that in today's description as well as the comments. It's PrizePicks.com/CLNS for a $100 deposit match and go from there. All right, now, just as the Dolphins worked out three offensive linemen or potential offensive lineman replacements, they worked out three defensive back reinforcements at perhaps the safety position, as that area of the secondary has been a little bit more banged up than the corners. And let's get to know the three players that the Dolphins worked out, starting with Bubba Bolden. Now, here's a guy that was undrafted in 2022, played at Miami, also spent some time at USC before he transferred, and spent his rookie season with the Browns. Before that, he signed with the Seahawks. So again, kind of a guy that bounced around a little bit in 2022. Didn't really get a chance to get his feet underneath him, and not a lot of game experience to go off of here. So I took a look at his draft profile, and kind of the script on him is he's somebody that's very physical and plays that position away like a Richard Sherman was, a bigger defensive back, great tackler, but where he's lacking is that top-end speed, which is a little bit concerning. So Bubba Bolden, 24 years old, a guy that the Dolphins worked out this week as a potential signee, perhaps to the practice squad. But, it's never wrong to speculate about who the Dolphins might be bringing in to add to the depth. Now, they also worked out Dane Cruikshank for the undrafted free agent that was with the Tennessee Titans 4 years, as well as a season in Chicago, and then back to the Titans in 2023. He's 28 years old and a fifth-round pick back in 2018. Now, a few more statistics here have registered for Dane Cruikshank. 54 games played, 4 starts, and 66 tackles. So a little bit more game experience there, but not necessarily a guy that's going to jump off the page as well. Went to Arizona and might add some value to the practice squad, but one more defensive back that the Dolphins worked out, Dane Cruikshank. And, it's a guy that has more game experience than Bubba Bolden, a little bit more time that he spent with the Titans, then back to the Chicago Bears, then back to the Tennessee Titans, and, could be somebody that adds value to the practice squad for the Dolphins. And lastly, A.J. Moore was the sixth player that the Dolphins worked out this week. And A.J. Moore, not necessarily, a guy that is a stranger to the NFL and not a ton of experience either, though. One game played in 2022, went to Mississippi. And for A.J. Moore, actually has a little bit more stats than some of the other guys that the Dolphins worked out earlier this week. 56 games played, 5 starts, 44 tackles, as well as 2 forced fumbles and 1 fumble recovery. It was an undrafted signee by New England in 2018. And so, again, I think the summary, these guys might be added to the practice squad, but not necessarily guys that are going to make an immediate impact, especially when you consider where this Dolphins secondary is at right now. These guys would be primarily added for depth reasons. The Dolphins just waived Kelvin Joseph yesterday. You see him no longer on the depth chart. Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, Kader Kohu. That is an electric defensive secondary to start with for the Miami Dolphins. So, again, if you're a Miami Dolphins GM, play the GM for a little bit with me. You got to pick one to sign. Who do you like? Bubba Bolden, Dane Cruikshank, or A.J. Moore are the 3 options that the Dolphins could be adding to the practice squad on the defensive side of the ball. Let me know in the comments. Type BB, DC, or AM. All right, now that the Dolphins have, in fact, working out a couple of different potential practice squad signees, as well as a couple of offensive lineman reinforcements, it's important to understand that this Dolphins team is in a great place following the bye week. Mike McDaniel said that the bye week came at the perfect time. They're rested, they're recovered, and they are ready to go moving forward. So I'm excited to see where this team goes in the second half of the season, because I think that first half of the season was full with some highs and also some lows, and the narrative is out there about what this team is like. They can't beat the good teams. They can only beat the bad teams, so on and so forth. But you know what? You subscribe to the channel and follow the journey along with me. You can subscribe at youtube.com/DolphinsNews, because we've got a Dolphins video for you every single day. And I hope you'll join me on the journey through the rest of the 2023 NFL season at youtube.com/DolphinsNews.